So here we are, 24 hours later, Samsung Galaxy Fold. But before I start, I want to give a huge shout out to TELUS. They're the ones who put this device in my hand. It's coming to Canada on June 7th, and I suggest you check it out on their network. They have a fantastic program called Bring It Back, and the way it works is you pay basically $0 for the cost of the phone, and all you have to do is bring the device back 2 years later. If you don't want to bring it back, you just pay the difference at the end of your plan, and you can keep the phone instead. Now, the Samsung Galaxy Fold has been a very surreal experience. This is the first time in the last 5 years that I've been very excited about smartphones. You're essentially getting a phone and tablet all in one device. The cool thing about it is the way it works. Whenever you want, you have the phone in your hand, but whenever you need, you have the tablet portion that you can simply flip open and use at any time. This thing is absolutely solid. They folded this device 200,000 times. Now, obviously there's some skepticism to that because this is being done by a robot. In fact, they actually stopped the test after 200,000 times because they felt it was more than adequate. Obviously, time is gonna tell, but I feel confident that everything's gonna be okay. Obviously, for a first generation device, they did a lot of things right. But if I was to talk about next year or whatever they release the next Galaxy Fold, I would want a few things changed. One, they need this part of the notch to be able to swipe down to give you the whole experience. Two, there's a little bit of a jelly effect when you're scrolling up and down on web pages. For example, if I have Google Now opened up and you're scrolling down, even if it's just like slightly, you can kind of see like the screen warp a little bit. You have to be kind of in front of it, but it is noticeable, but it's not a deal breaker. The next thing is the small screen that's on front. This is a great idea. I mean, essentially most people are gonna be using this as a phone 80% of the time. But because the display is a little bit too small, it's hard to work with it. You have to do a lot of things to customize the experience to make it more acceptable. For example, if you're gonna type on this, you gotta switch to the swipe keyboard so you can use gestures instead, because typing on this with 2 fingers is really darn tough. Also, if you have bad vision, it's really hard to see the text because the 4.6-inch display is squished in. Now, 4.6 inches is not a big deal to a lot of people. In fact, the old iPhone 7 is pretty much that size. It's the aspect ratio that makes it tough to work with. So there's a couple of things they can do. They can completely change the design of the way the Fold works, which I don't think is the best option for them. Or number 2 is they can change the aspect ratio of the inner fold to make it wider instead of taller, and then this will give more width for the display, making it more acceptable for smartphone standards. One of the cool things that were pointed out during my live stream was the ability to use the front display with the rear cameras. It's not active right now, but I think it's a feature that Samsung could easily activate on their devices. Just imagine the situation. You're a vlogger, you spent $2,000 on this device, or you're a photographer who loves smartphones. Wouldn't it be cool to use the small 4.6-inch display so that you can use the rear cameras to take a selfie or line up a shot? It would make this device the ultimate smartphone camera. So a couple more things before I take some of your questions that you guys asked on Twitter. The first thing is the battery life on this has been absolutely amazing for 24 hours. 5 hours of screen on time with 20% battery life left. Sound has been exceptional. There's 2 speakers, one on each side, so it's a little bit different than most phones that use the earpiece as a second speaker. You're getting true stereo sound. It does get a little bit louder than the Galaxy S10 Plus, but I still think the S10 Plus sounds slightly more vibrant. And finally, I want to talk about the app experience. A lot of these apps use a thing called continuity, which basically allows you to start on one display and continue it on another. So for example, if I have the maps open like this, if I shut the screen, you can see it on the smaller display. Now, a lot of these apps are already optimized for it, but the ones that aren't have a lot of issues. For example, if I'm looking at Twitter on the bigger display, for example, it works fine. But the second I switch to the smaller display, it doesn't work. The other issue is that if I decide to open up Twitter now on the smaller display, it's gonna force quit. All right, time for some questions. This is what you guys asked me on Twitter. Does the Fold's crease bother the experience, not just visually, but also from a usability standpoint, touch functionality? So no, you don't get bothered by it if you're staring directly at the screen. It's not until you move the screen to a different angle can you see the actual crease. If you run your finger down the spine, you can kind of feel a gap in between both portions of the phone, but overall, you get used to it pretty quickly. The next question is from Mo Dabes. What's the Canadian price? I couldn't find that info, and Samsung Canada website doesn't have any mention. We don't have Canadian pricing yet. It is coming to TELUS on June 7th, but my guess, Based on the 2,000 US price tag, it's probably gonna be around 2,800 Canadian. Rongbin asks, does the big corner notch bother you, and is the device thick? So it's actually not that thick when the device is completely open. In fact, it's actually thinner than the iPhone XS. The only time it becomes thick is when you close the device. Now, because it's significantly thinner, it actually feels very comfortable to hold. The next question comes from Sina Rad. Is it gonna be daily driver material? That's hard to say because there's a lot of little quirks and bugs that are happening right now to make it hard for me to recommend somebody to use it as a daily driver. But if you're a tech enthusiast, early adopter, you're gonna love this device. The next question comes from Zamir Ahmad. Hi brother, is it good compare Huawei X? Different between this two, worth the money. So again, very expensive. It's a generation 1 device. I don't think Samsung's planning to sell a lot of them. Like I said, if you're an early adopter, go ahead and buy it. It's a fun device to play around with, but I wouldn't buy this as your main only phone. The other question is, can it be compared to the Huawei X? Absolutely. I mean, it's the only other full-fledged device that's ready for mass consumption. So it's definitely gonna be a good comparison when we get our hands on it. The next question comes from Kino. Is it waterproof? What happens when you drop it? Can you put screen protectors? Can you skin it? So yes, you can skin it. I do know that dbrand is working on a skin for it. Screen protectors, kind of hard because if you close it, the screen protector will possibly snap. It's not waterproof. So if this thing goes in water, goodbye to the phone. So be very careful if you do buy this. And if you drop it, well, anything could happen. It might break, it might not, depends how it drops and where it drops. The Gigster asks, would you recommend buying a 1980 smartphone in 2019, even all the features seeing things on it? Are we really in the phase of folding smartphones? What about the crease on it? So I already talked about the crease. I think 1980 is expensive to pay for a foldable phone, but this is generation 1 and is expected. I'm not upset about the price. I think if you're really excited about this type of tech and you completely don't want to be disappointed, maybe wait for Gen 2 or Gen 3. So that pretty much wraps up this little Q&A session on the Galaxy Fold, and my experience is over 24 hours. Now, I'm gonna be doing a full review in the next couple of weeks. If you're not subbed to the channel, you're not gonna wanna miss that. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.